Hello and welcome to the launch of CCW's review of affordability in the water sector. At today's launch event, we will describe the challenge we're trying to solve, the context for the review, and importantly, explain how you can get involved in this work. We'll hear from our guests, Christine McGourty of Water UK and Matt Vaughan Wilson of the Money Advice Trust about what progress the water sector has already made and the challenges that remain for struggling households as we look to the future. Please do feel free to drop your questions in the comment box on the web page below, and we'll answer them at the end of today's session. We at CCW are delighted to have been asked by both DEFRA and the Welsh Government to conduct this review, which will see us explore the financial support currently offered to water customers and identify ways in which this support can be improved. At the end of 2019-20, almost 900,000 financially vulnerable households in England and Wales were receiving help through reduced water bills. That's 29% more than the previous year. As the financial implications of COVID-19 continue to make themselves known, could this number creep even higher? We think so. And while demand for support is high, water companies do use a range of schemes to help customers overcome their financial difficulties, meaning that the actual help that customers receive can vary widely based on where they live and the willingness and ability of fellow customers to pay in cross subsidies. 3 families in similar circumstances, house size, number of children, etc., but living in different parts of the country can receive either a 20% reduction in their bill, a 90% reduction, or no help at all. Is that right? And is that fair? Or is there a better way to do things that mean everyone receives consistent help regardless of where they live? These factors are the reality this research will seek to address, while considering carefully the need to build something that is sustainable in the face of increasing demand. There is also some great best practice in the industry, and the review will consider that best practice and also look outside the sector for inspiration. I'll now hand over to Christine McGourty, CEO of Water UK, to tell us more about progress that's already been made by water companies in the past 20 years. Christine.
Thank you, Emma. It's very good to be here, and we welcome this review. These are clearly very difficult times right across the economy, with many people facing real hardship across a whole range of their household expenses. So this feels like exactly the right time to take stock. In fact, it's over a decade since the last full review of this area, and there has been a huge amount of progress since then. Just looking back for a minute, that review led by Anna Walker created a whole new legal framework that allowed companies to offer more support to customers in need. And in the years that followed that review, all companies in England and Wales introduced social tariffs for customers who are struggling financially. There are now over 900,000 getting ongoing help with their bills, as Emma said, and that will increase, we expect, to about 1.5 million in the next few years. But social tariffs are just one part of the overall affordability package that each company provides. There are also a whole range of other things. There's advice on water saving that can help keep costs down. There are flexible payment methods that provide a bit of breathing space for those who really need it. There's charitable and trust funds that can help customers who are in difficulty to get back on their feet. And there's also joint working with a whole load of specialist and expert agencies in this area. And in fact, this year, obviously a very difficult year with COVID, companies stepped up help to provide more support than ever, and over 80,000 actually customers took payment breaks. So it is important to note that water companies recognise their role as a provider of an essential service comes with special responsibilities, and they take that very seriously. Last year, companies came together to look at how they could ensure that bills were affordable for all, and to develop a strategy ultimately to end water poverty for the longer term. Achieving that ambition obviously is going to require a joint effort across a whole range of stakeholders. So a fresh pair of eyes this year across the whole policy framework is really welcome. And we would just encourage everyone to get involved and together work towards this ambition for the long term. Thanks very much, Emma. Back to you.
Thanks, Christine. Yes, very important to highlight all the good work that has gone on to date and to recognise and celebrate that work. I now want to turn to Matt, who's going to help us look to the future and to see how adequate or otherwise the financial support is that's provided at the moment. So, Matt.
Thank you, Emma. So at the Money Advice Trust, we're a national debt advice charity. We were really pleased to hear that this review was going to take place, and even more pleased to be part of it. So I want to say a few things, 3.5 things, about why we think this is such an important piece of work. The first thing to say is that affordability really is a challenge, and we see this primarily through the number of people contacting our main service, National Debt Line, who are already behind on their water bills. If you look at how that's changed over time, if you go back to 2008, very different period, just 4% of people contacting us had water arrears. Last year, 17% of people contacting us were already behind on their water bills. And of course, that's only those people who have fallen behind. It doesn't necessarily reflect those people who are struggling on a monthly basis or an ongoing basis to pay for their usage. And it's not just water that we've seen that trend with. It's happened right across household bills. We've seen it in energy, council tax, rent. All of those debt types have gone up over the last 10 to 12 years. And that reflects a much broader affordability challenge facing so many UK households. Tied up with that is not just low income. For many of the people we're advising, they just don't really have enough income to cover their essential costs. But you also have issues around how they receive that income. More people in self-employment, more people in precarious employment, 0 hours contracts, all kinds of situations where they just can't guarantee the amount of money they will have from one month to the next. So that's the sort of picture that we've seen for the last decade of the context. And then, of course, we have the current situation, and that timing makes this review all the more urgent. It's difficult in such a fast-changing situation to say very much specific. Anything you say is almost immediately out of date by the time you check the news. But going back to the start of this crisis, or towards the start, back in May, we did a survey of people that had called National Debt Line over the previous year, so people who had already had some financial difficulties. And we found that half of the people who responded to that had already fallen behind or fallen further behind on their household bills, an immediate impact there on their ability to keep up. And 26% of those said that it was water that they had fallen behind on. Interestingly, only 9% said that they'd approached their water company for help. And I think that does reflect, despite the really very impressive help that the industry has given and the numbers being reached, it reflects that ongoing gap. It's difficult to reach everybody who does need help. And of course, looking to the future, we expect very significant increases in the number of households that are struggling. And for some, it will be households that haven't been in that position before. So we can expect an impact on those previously struggling, but also people who previously have been in a reasonable financial situation, need to make difficult adjustments, and the help that they need may look different to the help that other groups have previously received. I think it's also important to review the way that support is provided. So a point that Emma made right at the start is about the variation in the support available. As a national charity, that's something that we feel very strongly. When we pick up the phone to someone, we could be telling one person in one part of the country that they can receive help, and the same person in a different region may not qualify because of the variety of different schemes available. But by the same token, the current system does give companies flexibility. It does put the onus on companies to try to understand their customers, and it gives them an ability to create bespoke offers that perhaps are in tune with specific local needs. And I do recognise, many companies work with us and seek our input. Certainly do recognise that there's a lot of work going on across the industry to try to understand customers and try to get help that's appropriate to customers' needs. So it's quite a difficult question, actually. What should that help look like? And that's, one marker of the significance of this piece of work. It will give an opportunity to confront difficult questions like that and many others about how the mechanisms for providing help to customers. And the final half a point, I wanted to end on a positive note. When we did a focus group recently with some of our debt advisors who are on the front line and asked them what are they hearing from clients that we're helping through National Debt Line, one advisor said to me, we like advising about water because there's usually some help that you can give. You can actually give someone some positive news for a change. And I think it is important to reflect on how far the industry has come and the fact that now water is one area where so much help is available. It's just a case of making sure that help is provided to everyone who needs it on the right basis. And Emma, at that point, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Matt. I think the presentations have highlighted the challenges that this research and this important piece of work will face, and therefore reiterates, if you like, the importance of wide involvement and engagement from anyone who has a view, an idea, or something to contribute to this review. I think also makes a very important point around something that we can all do today, now, and that is raise awareness of the help that is available at the moment. And certainly CCW's own research also highlights that not everyone knows the help that's available. And that is particularly true in certain communities and certain vulnerable groups. So perhaps there is something we can all do today, as well as looking to and contributing to the review. So I'd now like to bring in Andy from the CCW team, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about the review and most importantly, how you can get involved. Andy.
Thanks, Emma. Hello, everyone. You've heard from others today why this review is so important and represents a vital opportunity to take a completely fresh look at the way water customers in Wales and England are supported, taking into account the differences in those two countries. But we can't do it without you. Your input will be essential in shaping our conclusions and in ensuring the review can help lead to positive outcomes for financially vulnerable customers. That's why today we're publishing a call for evidence, which will be open until the 15th of December. Document is available from the same page used to access this webinar, so feel free to download it as soon as today's launch event ends. We're seeking views from all interested parties, including members of the public, customers and organisations that represent the interests of households, financially vulnerable or otherwise. We know there's a wealth of knowledge and experience that we can tap into, and we really value sharing that with us. We particularly welcome suggestions for creative solutions that can help us drive forward on this issue. If for any reason you can't respond in writing and would like to give evidence in some other way, please let us know and we can arrange a call or some other form of contact. Any quick thoughts and comments can be added to the comments section on our website page dedicated to the review. During the consultation period, we'll also be holding a series of stakeholder discussions, utilising our existing networks such as Water UK and the Essential Services Access Network. And to bring in additional and new voices that we don't normally hear from, we'll hold an open discussion session. Further details of that event and how to participate will be added to the review webpage soon. So thanks very much for your time today. We're really looking forward to hearing from you with your thoughts and ideas. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Andy. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, we do have the opportunity to ask, or indeed answer, maybe ask, but certainly answer some questions. So I'm just going to turn to the comment box now. We have a question from John Thompson. Is CCW planning to undertake specific research for the review on the scope and effectiveness of financial support for customers by water companies? So I think the short answer to that is yes, John, but I'll hand this one to Andy, who could perhaps add a little bit more context and colour about what that research might look like.
Absolutely. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, obviously we've been very active in this area of work. So we've established a good knowledge base in that area already that we can draw upon. And obviously we'll be also taking into account the views that we receive from stakeholders. But to build on that, we're also doing some specific research with low-income households to understand their experiences, whether the system works for them at the moment, where there are gaps that we might be able to address. So we'll be bringing that in, and we'll also be doing a piece of work to update our understanding of the fuller picture in terms of what's happening across a range of different sectors and the help that's available there, so that we can make sure that that best practice is applied in the water sector as well, if it's transferable.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I have another question from a viewer. Will the review just focus on social tariffs, or will it look at other support provided by companies? So again, sorry, Andy, I'm going to throw that one at you, and then perhaps ask Christine to provide any general comment on that. So will the review just focus on social tariffs, or will it look at other support provided by companies? Andy.
Yeah. Thanks, Emma. Yes, the review will look at the whole range of support currently provided to customers and potentially possible to provide in the future. Social tariffs obviously is a key part of that and a very important element, but it's by no means the only subject of this review. As we've heard today, there are a lot of current ways in which companies support their customers, and we'll be looking across the whole range of those.
Thank you. And Christine, do you think that that's an appropriate approach in terms of that wider picture?
Yeah, absolutely, Emma. I think that feels about right. If you look at the numbers, for example, I think in the last year, the total value of the support through social tariffs was over 100 million. But if you look also at the wider affordability support in its totality, the value is of the order of 200 to 250 million. So that wider affordability package is providing a lot of additional support, and I think it's important to look at the whole piece in the round. So that's quite right.
Okay, thank you. And I guess that taking that broader approach also allows us to consider individual needs, because it's very challenging. Or another one of our challenges is to talk about typical households or the consumer, when actually, obviously, as Matt has already highlighted, there are a whole range of very individual circumstances, perhaps people who are vulnerable for the first time, or a whole range of different issues impacting their lives. So probably that feels like another reason why looking at a breadth of measures feels appropriate. So we've had another question, which perhaps I'll ask Matt for his views on initially, which is around will wider vulnerability support be taken into account? And I guess perhaps, Matt, is there any sort of best practice with regard to vulnerability that you would highlight from other sectors, or that you see from your experience, that would be useful for us to consider?
There's a lot of best practice. We have a hub actually on the Money Advice Trust website. So if anyone's interested in that, I would suggest go onto our website and take a look at some of the guidance that we've produced, which will bring in many partner organisations that we work with as well. I think it is a difficult one though. There's such an overlap between financial difficulty and non-financial vulnerabilities that it often makes sense to look at both together, and that's one reason why we have very much gone down that route of trying to look at both together. But I think when you're looking to design help packages, focusing in on affordability makes sense. So I would imagine the focus needs to be very specifically on that.
Thank you, Matt. We've had another question from Karma Loveday. Water report. So, as governments have asked CCW to conduct this review, is a more publicly funded help a possibility, as well as help funded by water companies or other water customers? So, question there about public funding as a possible option. So again, I'll ask Andy to come in on this. But first, really by stating, we are not ruling anything out, and therefore that is certainly one of the options that we will look at alongside others. But Andy, is there anything else that you wanted to add to that point?
Really, just to emphasise that point, really, Emma, that we're starting with a clean piece of paper and nothing is ruled out, and we'll be looking at all options and possibilities and evaluating those and trying to come to some conclusions.
Thank you. Question from Lou Beardmore, any thoughts on how we can engage more hard to reach communities or vulnerable customer groups to ensure all views and needs are heard? I think that is a really good question, and certainly one of the challenges that we have identified in terms of setting up the project. We've taken steps to ensure that the governance framework, but most importantly the membership of the groups, kind of gets to as many people as possible, and it's, I think, something certainly we'll have to keep checking at each stage of the process. We've also considered how we can test any kind of early conclusions or recommendations, particularly with vulnerable groups, to make sure that anything that we finally conclude also takes into account that whole range of skills. But I think it will be an ongoing issue for the review, and something we'd very much welcome others' contribution and help and support in. Again, Andy, I don't know if you've got anything to add to those comments.
Just to say that it is really important that there's a lot of people hopefully viewing the event today and that will be involved with during the process of consultation, that are gatekeepers to those people who are hard to reach and have those ways in to them and to understand their circumstances, and hopefully they will be able to help reflect their views on their behalf. And then obviously the research that we're doing with low income households, we'll be trying to reach those households directly through that research as well, to try and bring insights from that work.
Absolutely. Did Matt or Christine, would either of you like to add any comment to that? Or
I mean, one thing I would say is that I think it's important to just underline what a big challenge it is to try to engage fully with customers, and particularly those hard to reach groups. It's something that we struggle with in the debt advice sector. Many people come to us when they're in quite an advanced situation. They've fallen behind on lots of things, and we're actively trying to reach out to people in a position where we're independent, we're giving help. So you might think there's nothing to fear, but actually there are lots of barriers to engagement. And I don't want that to come across as pessimistic, but we do have to accept that there aren't easy answers here. Hopefully we can get to the right answers by this painstaking piece of work.
Absolutely. Christine, did you have anything to add on that point?
Emma, just to agree, that's obviously a really really important challenge. The water companies themselves, in providing support, do have clearly a lot of experience in reaching out to their customers. They're obliged to take into account the needs of their customers and the views on their customers, or on the support that's provided. So I'm sure they'll have a lot to contribute as well, in terms of making sure that customers' views are fed into the review.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So we'll put the question back to Lou, I think, is how we'll work with that one, and others from all the water companies. We've had a question from Jamie Greer at Turn to Us, and I think that kind of builds on the point that we've just discussed, asking whether there's an opportunity to kind of co-create policy changes and policy development options with those who are currently suffering kind of detriment at this point in time. And I think actually that would, thank you for that comment, Jamie, I think that would be a really good way of addressing the point that we've just made. So perhaps we can pick up after in terms of any advice that you'd like to give the review on how we can practically achieve that and take that forward. Question now from Zoe McLeod, and lots of questions coming in, so thank you for your engagement. It says there was already a gap between support available and pre-COVID, and now there's a chasm. Will you be exploring views on what is an appropriate role for water companies and what they can realistically be expected to deliver? and what is and is not appropriate for customers to cross-subsidise. So, Andy, did you have any comment there? So what's the appropriate role for water companies given the chasm, and what is or isn't appropriate for customers to cross-subsidise, I think, are the 2 points.
Yeah. I think, you know, again, it's about the fact that we are asking that question really of stakeholders and those who are in this working in this field, and we want to hear views on that, and we will try and find the balance within that. I think there's no quick answers. We've obviously we know water companies do a lot already, and we value that. We've often called on them to do more in some respects, and I suspect that may continue. But at this point, we're just looking to hear from people and try and work out what the best approach going forward is. We know that customers will want to make sure we hear customers' voices heard in the process, and that, you know, if there is any requirement for customers to fund that they continue to have a say in that, or else that is something which government decides is the appropriate way forward.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Andy. I have a question which I'm going to ask Christine to comment on from Kiri Saunders. How has the water sector received news of the review?
Yeah, thanks for that. The water sector absolutely welcomes the review. As I mentioned, it's actually 10 years since the last major review of the policy framework in this area, and a lot has changed since then. And I'm sure there will be lessons learned from that. We have seen a lot of progress since then, and the other speakers have referred to that. And of course, we'll want to build on that, and also look at, obviously, this year has been so difficult, not just with the health impacts of COVID, but the economic impacts too. So it feels absolutely right to do this review. Water companies will be playing their part in it, and we very much welcome a holistic look at this whole area to see what's working, what isn't working, where changes are needed, and how we can all do more to make sure that those who need help are getting it.
Thank you, Christine. I'm probably going to take about 2 more questions, if that's okay, but we will make sure that we pick up all the questions that have been asked but not answered, and provide some further comment and opportunity to have a conversation. I'm going to turn to Steve Crabb at Affinity Water, who's asked, will the review consider opportunities for cross-sector support for customers with problem debt, and whether data sharing will be in scope? So I'll probably ask Matt in a moment to provide some comments about cross-sector support. But just to add that CCW wrote at the beginning of October to a number of bodies who are active in this sector, looking at affordability more generally, and have suggested that we do exactly what I think you're suggesting, Steve, and have a round table to discuss issues of bills more generally, and to look to collaborate and to make sense of our energies and efforts, and to, you know, act in a parallel fashion. So that's certainly an invitation that CCW has made, and I hope that bodies will respond to that, and we will continue to champion that and bring that kind of cross-sector perspective. But Matt, I don't know if there's anything that you can share in relation to Steve's question.
So in terms of cross-sector support, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there clearly is a lot of mileage in that. But when you look at other sectors, very often it's the differences that come out immediately as much as the similarities. So thinking about in this current crisis, the mantra has been about payment breaks. But that doesn't necessarily work as well in a water context or a utility context as it does for credit products where you have a fixed term. You know, water bills carry on. So having a payment break, well, you just have then some arrears to catch up with rather than shifting things to the end of a fixed term contract. So does that work so well? By the same token, in energy, a lot of the current talk, certainly this week, has been around prepayment customers, and that's obviously an option that isn't available in water. There's some very specific issues that come up about people not having access to supply. That said, one very specific thing that is happening in the energy industry at the moment is around fuel vouchers and looking at those vouchers which give people short-term support on prepayment meters, using that as almost a way of designing interventions, an opportunity to work in communities, but also through national organisations and identify people that are in crisis who are often seeking help through trusted intermediaries and trusted points, which is a point we often come back to. So I think there's definitely something there. There will be things across lots of sectors, but it's going to, again, there'll be a lot of reviewing to be done to pull out those good examples.
Okay. Thank you very much. So maybe
seem to have lost Emma. Maybe I'll see if we've got any more questions to take and see if Emma's able to rejoin us for the end. We've got a question about whether we're planning to engage with customers who are just about managing. I think what we would hope is that the research that we're doing with lower income groups will capture some of those. We know that it's not just about customers who are clearly already struggling and falling into debt. Many customers do carry on paying their water charges beyond the point at which it's affordable for them to do so. And the only way they do that is by making sacrifices elsewhere in terms of things like food and heating. So in that respect, those are just about managing customers to all intents and purposes. To water companies, they seem to be doing okay, but actually they're having to fight really hard to keep their head above water. So we would expect those to be captured within that work. And obviously, all contact that we have with customers through our work in handling their inquiries and complaints, we build up a picture. And obviously, many of the people that we work with, the partners that we engage with in this area of work, will be able to bring them into the review as well. So, sorry, Matt. Yes, do you want to say something?
Some of the questions that have come up around CCW's role, given that you work closely with water companies and have had a role in designing or giving input on some of the help that's provided and have policy positions on this. Is there a question around your role carrying out this review and the question of independence? I thought I would step in and ask that one, given that it's a question for CCW.
Thanks, Matt. Yes. So I think first thing I would say is our process in the social tariff development is very much one of consultation. Water companies are required to consult with us as the representative of customers on those schemes. And obviously we will give them feedback on those schemes and ensure that the research that they've done, that actually customers are supportive of the approach they're taking. And in doing so, we balance the interests of both the customers who are it's aimed at going to be helped and the customers ultimately who are currently asked to subsidise that. Now, through that work, we've obviously helped companies move significantly forward over the last decade. But whilst we've been doing that, we've also been highlighting some of the limitations of that system. So I think, yes, we take a pragmatic role at the moment in getting that help, and that has reaped many rewards. But throughout that, we've always highlighted the limitations, and we start this review with a very clean slate, and we'll be wanting to genuinely have a fresh look at the approach going forward, and really just find the best outcome for customers. Emma, hi, you've been able to rejoin us.
I have indeed, yeah. Sorry for my technical blip there. And thank you for highlighting that question, Matt. I mean, obviously that's very, very important that we adhere to the highest standards of governance and independence in the review, and we have structured it to take that into account, and we'll continue to take that very seriously through the process as we move forward. So I think that brings us to the end of our session and our live launch. As you can tell, it was live. So thank you very much to you all for joining in, for showing support and engagement at this very, very early stage of the review and posing some great questions, which, as I mentioned, I will ensure that we address through this process. Thank you very much to Christine and Matt and Andy for their insight at this early stage. And most importantly, please do go to the website, have a look and see how you can get engaged and involved in this process. You know, we really, really want your input and your feedback, and, you know, it will be so much richer, so much better if collectively we support this process and ensure that we work together to deliver the best for water customers and water consumers. So once again, thank you for your time and attention, and I will now bring this session to a close. Thank you.